When my son got married, everyone assumed my life was about to get smaller, quieter, easier to overlook. I didn't correct them. I smiled, welcomed his new wife, and let them believe I was exactly what I appeared to be. An older woman with modest clothes, simple habits, and nothing worth noticing. What they didn't know was that my late husband had just left me something significant. I could have spoken up. I almost did. But I stayed quiet because I wanted peace. I didn't lie. I just didn't speak. And looking back, that silence saved me from a heartbreak far worse than the one I'd already endured when I lost my husband. Because by the time the truth surfaced, it was already too late. Hello everyone. My name is Margaret Walters, and I'm 67 years old. My son Samuel got married 8 months ago to a woman named Vanessa. And on their wedding day, I made a choice that would change everything. I chose to stay quiet about something important, something that would have transformed how they saw me, how they treated me, maybe even how they loved me. If I had spoken, I would have lost everything. And I didn't know that yet. Before I dive deeper, I'd love to know, where are you joining me from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. It always warms my heart to see how far these stories reach. I need you to understand who I was before all this began. Not the woman they see now, but the woman I built myself into piece by piece after my husband died. Thomas died 12 years ago. A heart attack at 59, sudden and cruel, the way death often is when you think you have decades left. Samuel was 23 then, just graduated, just starting his career in software engineering. We buried Thomas on a Thursday. By Monday, I was sitting in a lawyer's office learning that my husband, my careful, practical husband, had been far more strategic than I ever knew. Thomas had been a real estate investor. Not flashy, not the type to brag at dinner parties. He bought property the way some men collect stamps. Methodically, quietly, with an eye for value others missed. When he died, I inherited 6 properties across the city, 3 apartment buildings, 2 commercial spaces, and 1 penthouse he bought at auction 15 years earlier, renovated himself, and never told me he'd intended as our retirement home. He wanted to surprise you, the lawyer said. Once Samuel was settled, Thomas never got to surprise me. Instead, he left me wealthy in a way I'd never imagined, and completely alone. I didn't tell Samuel about the extent of the inheritance. Not then. He was grieving, trying to establish himself, and I was his mother. I didn't want money to complicate the purity of what we had. So I told him about the life insurance, about the house being paid off, about being comfortable. I let him think I was living off savings and his father's pension. I managed the properties quietly. I hired a property manager. I learned the business Thomas had built in silence. And I lived simply in our family home in the suburbs because it felt like keeping Thomas close. Samuel never asked questions. Why would he? His mother was a widow, living modestly, content with her garden and her book club and her Sunday dinners. I was exactly what he expected me to be. Samuel met Vanessa 3 years ago at a tech conference. She was bright, ambitious, working in marketing for a startup. 28 years old, polished in that particular way young professional women are now, perfect makeup, designer handbag that was probably a month's salary, confident handshake. When he brought her to dinner the first time, she looked around our home with poorly concealed surprise. It's so cozy, she said, and I knew she meant small. Old-fashioned. Beneath what she expected for someone whose son earned 6 figures. It's home, I said simply. I liked her at first. Or rather, I wanted to like her. She made Samuel happy. That was obvious in the way he looked at her. The way he laughed more freely than he had in years. She was smart, driven, and she talked about their future with a certainty that felt reassuring. We're going to do big things, Margaret. She told me that first night, squeezing Samuel's hand. We're not going to settle. I smiled and served dessert and thought about Thomas's quiet empire, and how the biggest things are often the ones nobody talks about. The engagement happened fast. 6 months of dating, then a ring, then wedding planning that consumed every conversation. I offered to help financially, carefully, the way a modestly comfortable widow might. I have some savings, I said. I'd like to contribute. Vanessa's eyes lit up, but then she and Samuel exchanged a glance I couldn't quite read. That's sweet, Mom, Samuel said. But we want to do this ourselves. We're building our life together, you know? We want it to feel like ours. I was proud of that. Truly. So I stepped back and played the role they seemed to need. The supportive mother-in-law, present but not intrusive, helpful but not controlling. I didn't realize the wedding wasn't the beginning. It was the test. The ceremony was beautiful. Small, elegant, at a boutique hotel in the city. I wore a simple navy dress from a department store, something appropriate and invisible. Vanessa's mother wore Chanel and made sure everyone knew it. During the reception, I sat at a table with some of Samuel's colleagues and their wives. They were polite, making small talk about the food, the flowers, how lovely the bride looked. Then one of the wives, Jessica, I think her name was, leaned in with wine-loosened candor. "It must be such a relief," she said, "knowing Samuel's settled. Now you don't have to worry about him anymore." "I never worried," I said. "He's always been capable." "No, I mean financially," she pressed. "My mother-in-law is always anxious about money, but at least Samuel can help you out if you need it. That must feel secure." I noticed the shift before they did. The assumption had already formed. I was the aging mother who might someday become a burden. The modest widow whose son had surpassed her, whose best years were behind her, who would need help as she declined. I smiled and changed the subject, but something crystallized in that moment. They had decided who I was without ever asking, and I chose again to stay quiet. The first few months of their marriage were a dance of small humiliations I'm not sure they even recognized they were performing. Vanessa started giving me advice. Unsolicited, gentle, but constant. "You should really update your wardrobe, Margaret. You'd feel so much better about yourself. Have you thought about coloring your hair? Gray ages you. That car is so old. Aren't you worried about safety?" Each comment landed like a paper cut. Small enough to seem meaningless, sharp enough to sting. Samuel started deferring to her in ways that felt like betrayal and growth tangled together. When I called to invite them for Sunday dinner, he'd say, "Let me check with Vanessa." When I suggested we take a trip together, just the two of us like we used to, he'd hesitate. Vanessa might feel left out. I understood. Marriage meant building a new primary relationship. But understanding didn't make it hurt less. They started making jokes, little ones, laughing ones, the kind that carried truth wrapped in humor. "Mom still uses a flip phone," Samuel would say at gatherings, shaking his head fondly like I was a charming relic. "Margaret's so old school," Vanessa would add. "She doesn't even have Instagram." I didn't tell them I had a smartphone I used for managing my properties. I didn't tell them I understood technology just fine. I simply chose not to perform my life for strangers online. I let them believe what they wanted to believe. 6 months into the marriage, they started making decisions about me without me. Samuel called one evening. "Mom, Vanessa and I were talking. We think maybe you should consider moving closer to us. We found this great senior community." "I'm 67, not 90, I interrupted gently. "I'm quite happy where I am." "But you're all alone in that house," Vanessa's voice joined in. They had me on speaker. "What if something happens? What if you fall?" "Then I'll call 911, I said, keeping my voice light. "Like anyone would." There was a pause. Then Vanessa, softer, more serious. "We're just worried about you. We want you to be safe and comfortable. You shouldn't be maintaining that big house by yourself." That's when I understood why staying quiet was revealing more than any confession ever could. They saw me as a project. Problem to be managed. Someone whose life needed organizing by people who knew better. They weren't being cruel. That was almost worse. They genuinely believed they were helping. They had looked at my life, my simple clothes, my old car, my quiet routines, and decided I needed saving. 2 weeks later, Vanessa called me. Just her, without Samuel. "Margaret, can we meet for coffee? Just us girls." I met her at a cafe downtown, one of those places with exposed brick and $10 lattes. She ordered a matcha something. I ordered black coffee. "I wanted to talk to you about something sensitive," she began, stirring her drink slowly. "Samuel and I have been thinking about our future. About starting a family." "That's wonderful," I said, and meant it. "The thing is," she continued, not meeting my eyes, "we're trying to be financially responsible. We're saving for a down payment on a bigger place, thinking about childcare costs, all of that. She paused. And we were wondering, have you thought about what you're going to do with your house? Do with it? Well, you're there all alone. So much space for one person. And the market is really good right now for sellers. She finally looked at me, her expression earnest. If you sold it, you could move somewhere more manageable. Maybe even help us with our down payment? It would be investing in your grandchildren's future. There it was. And then they asked me for something I never expected. Not directly, not crudely, but the ask was there, dressed up in concern and family values and practical thinking. They wanted my house. They wanted me to liquidate my life so they could accelerate theirs. That request told me everything I needed to know. I didn't answer Vanessa right away. I took a sip of my coffee, let the silence stretch just long enough to feel heavy, and then I smiled. That's an interesting idea, I said. I'll think about it. Her face brightened immediately. Really? Oh, Margaret, that would be amazing. I know it's a big decision, but honestly, it would solve so many problems. For all of us. For all of us. As if my home of 30 years, the place where I'd raised Samuel, where Thomas had died in our bed upstairs, where every room held memories they couldn't begin to understand, as if that was a mutual problem requiring a mutual solution. I said I'd think about it, I repeated, gentler this time. These things take time. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Of course. Take all the time you need. But just know we're here for you. Whatever you decide, we'll help you through the transition. The transition. As if I were a patient being moved between facilities. I drove home in my old Honda, the one they thought was a safety hazard, and I sat in my driveway for 20 minutes before going inside. The house looked exactly as it always had. A modest 2-story colonial with blue shutters, a garden that needed weeding, a mailbox Thomas had painted by hand. From the outside, you'd never know that the woman who lived here owned property worth $8 million. I had kept Thomas's secret, and now, without meaning to, I'd created my own. The pressure started subtly, then grew. Samuel began sending me real estate listings. Just look at these, Mom. Some of these condos are really nice. Low maintenance, security, a community. Vanessa started talking about decluttering. You must have so much stuff accumulated over the years. We should have a big sale. Make some extra money and lighten your load. They visited more often, but the visits felt like inspections. Vanessa would walk through rooms, commenting on repairs that needed doing, updates that would increase value. If you replace this carpet, you'd get another $20,000 easy, she'd say, tapping her foot on the hallway runner Thomas and I had chosen together. Samuel started mentioning their struggles more pointedly. Rent is killing us, Mom. We're paying $2,000 a month for a 1-bedroom. Throwing money away. I listened. I nodded. I made sympathetic sounds. And I didn't tell them that the building they were renting in, the sleek modern complex downtown, was one of mine. That their rent check went to my property manager, who deposited it into an account they didn't know existed. The irony wasn't lost on me. They were literally paying me while asking me to give them money. 3 months after Vanessa's coffee shop proposition, they invited me to dinner at their apartment. When I arrived, I found they'd printed out documents. We wanted to show you something, Samuel said, spreading papers across their small dining table. We met with a financial advisor. Vanessa jumped in, her voice animated. We created a whole plan, Margaret. Look, if you sell the house after closing costs and everything, you'd clear about $400,000. You could put $300 toward our down payment. We found an amazing house. Perfect for kids, great school district, and you'd still have $100,000 plus whatever you have in savings. That would set you up in a nice senior apartment, Samuel added. We found several with assisted living options for when you need it down the line. You wouldn't have to worry about anything. I looked at the spreadsheets, the highlighted numbers, the timeline they'd created. They'd planned my entire future without asking me a single question about what I wanted. You'd have equity in our house, Vanessa explained, pointing to a line item. 10% ownership. So you'd actually be investing, not just giving. And when we sell eventually, which we would, to upgrade, you'd get your share back plus appreciation. 10% ownership of a house I'd be funding 30% of. The math alone was insulting, but that wasn't what made my chest tighten. It was the assumption, the absolute certainty that I had nothing better to do with my life than bankroll theirs. I need time to think, I said. Samuel's face fell. Mom, we need to move fast on this house. There are other buyers interested. Then perhaps they should buy it, I said quietly. I'm not ready to make this decision. Vanessa's expression cooled. We're just trying to help you, Margaret. You can't stay in that house forever. It's too much for you. And yet, I said standing, I've managed perfectly well so far. I left before dessert. Samuel called twice that night. I didn't answer. The next phase was harder to watch because it showed me who my son was becoming, or perhaps who he'd always been beneath the surface. He started pulling away. Sunday dinners became every other week, then monthly. Phone calls shortened. When I asked about his life, he'd give one-word answers and then find an excuse to hang up. Vanessa, meanwhile, became pointed in her complaints to their friends, complaints I heard about through my book club, where one woman's daughter worked with Vanessa. She says you're being stubborn, Mrs. Chun told me over tea, her voice gentle with concern. That you're refusing help and making things difficult. I'm not refusing help, I said. I'm refusing to do what they want me to do. Those are different things. Are they? Mrs. Chun asked. When you're their age, you'll understand. They're worried about you. But I wasn't their age. I was my age. And I understood things they couldn't yet imagine. 4 months in, Samuel showed up at my house unannounced. Alone. I made him coffee, the way he used to like it, before Vanessa convinced him to switch to green tea, and we sat at the kitchen table where I'd helped him with homework, where we'd mourned Thomas together, where we'd had 1,000 ordinary conversations that built a lifetime of love. Mom, he said, and his voice cracked slightly. Why won't you let us help you? Help me with what exactly? With your future. With being practical. You're not getting any younger, and this house is mine, I finished. Samuel, I love you. But my house is mine. My decisions are mine. My future is mine. He looked at me like I was a stranger. Vanessa says you're being selfish. The word landed like a slap. Selfish, I repeated. Because I won't give you $300,000? It's not about the money. Then what is it about? He struggled, his face reddening. It's about family. About helping each other. About recognizing that we're young and building our lives and you're settled. You've had your time. I've had my time. As if life were a pie with limited slices, and I'd eaten mine. And now I should pass the rest to him whether I was finished or not. I see, I said quietly. No, that came out wrong. He reached for my hand, but I pulled back. Samuel, I raised you alone after your father died. I worked, I sacrificed, I made choices you never saw so you could have opportunities one never had. And I did it gladly. But I didn't do it so that one day you could tell me I've had my time. Mom, I think you should leave. He left. The coffee sat untouched on the table, growing cold. That night, I did something I hadn't done in 12 years. I drove to the Penthouse. It sits on the 42nd floor of a glass tower overlooking the river. Thomas bought it as a shell and spent 5 years transforming it. Exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows, a kitchen designed for someone who loved cooking the way he did. He'd installed bookshelves in every room because he knew I loved reading. There's a balcony where you can watch the sunset paint the city gold. I have a key. I've always had a key. But I'd never moved in. It felt like betraying the memory of our real home. The place where we'd actually lived. I stood at those windows that night, looking down at the lights of the city, and I thought about Thomas. About the life he'd built for us in silence. About the gift he'd left me, not just in money but in choices. And I thought about Samuel and Vanessa, renting their sleek apartment 12 floors below me in a building I owned, eating off credit cards while demanding I sell my history to fund their impatience. The truth didn't come from me, but it was about to come from somewhere else. Because 2 days later, my property manager called with news that would change everything. Mrs. Walters, David said, his voice careful, we have a situation. One of your tenants, a Samuel Walters. He's asking questions about the building ownership. He wants to know who to contact about a lease dispute. I closed my eyes. What kind of dispute? He claims there's a noise issue and wants to negotiate a rent reduction. He's demanding to speak with the owner directly. Samuel wanted to speak with the owner. My son wanted to speak with me, and he had no idea. I told David I'd handle it personally. Are you sure, Mrs. Walters? He asked, his voice uncertain. I can deal with tenant complaints. That's what you pay me for. I'm sure, I said. Forward me his email. I'll respond directly. After I hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at my phone. The house was quiet except for the clock Thomas had bought at an estate sale. Its steady tick-tick-tick marking time I couldn't get back. Samuel wanted a rent reduction. He wanted to negotiate with the building owner, to leverage a noise complaint into saving money, the way young people do when they're stretched thin and desperate. He had no idea he was asking his mother for a discount. I could have told David to handle it. I could have approved a small reduction, let them have their minor victory, and maintained my silence indefinitely. They'd never have to know. But Vanessa's words echoed in my mind. You've had your time. And I realized something Thomas probably understood long before I did. Silence reveals truth, but sometimes the truth needs to be spoken aloud. I didn't respond to Samuel's email immediately. Instead, I spent 3 days preparing. I contacted my lawyer, Helen Morrison, a sharp woman in her 50s who'd helped me navigate the properties after Thomas died. I explained the situation in full, the pressure to sell my house, the request for money, Samuel's unknowing rent complaint to his own mother. Helen listened without interrupting, then laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. Margaret, this is almost Shakespearean, she said. What do you want to do? I want to meet with them, I said. Officially. As their landlord. Are you sure? Once you reveal this, you can't take it back. I know. Helen drafted a letter on official letterhead from Morrison and Associates, requesting a meeting with Mr. Samuel Walters and Mrs. Vanessa Walters regarding their lease and building concerns. Professional, formal, revealing nothing except that the building owner had agreed to meet them personally, a rare courtesy. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 2 p.m., in the building's conference room on the ground floor. Samuel called me that weekend, excited. Mom, you won't believe this. The owner of our building actually wants to meet with us. Nobody ever gets FaceTime with these people, they always hide behind property managers. Vanessa thinks we can negotiate a serious reduction, maybe even break our lease without penalty and get our deposit back. That's wonderful, sweetheart, I said, my voice steady. Yeah, Vanessa's already researching tenant rights, building code violations we could cite. We're going in prepared. He paused. Hey, do you want to get dinner after? We haven't seen you in a while. 3 weeks. It had been 3 weeks since he'd left my kitchen after telling me I'd had my time. Let's see how your meeting goes first, I said. Tuesday arrived with cruel sunshine. One of those crisp autumn days that makes everything look sharper, clearer, more beautiful than it has any right to be. I dressed carefully. Not the department store clothes they were used to seeing, but also not ostentatiously. A well-tailored navy suit Thomas had insisted I buy years ago for a charity gala. Pearl earrings. My hair, which Vanessa thought I should color, swept back in a neat bun. I looked exactly like what I was. A woman of means who didn't need to prove it. I arrived at the building early and waited in the conference room with Helen. The space was all glass and chrome with a view of the river. My building. My conference room. My view. Last chance to back out, Helen said softly. I'm not backing out. At exactly 2 p.m. the door opened. Samuel walked in first, wearing a button-down shirt and khakis, his professional armor. Vanessa followed in a dress that probably cost more than they could afford, her laptop bag clutched like a weapon. They were ready for battle. Then they saw me. Samuel stopped so abruptly that Vanessa bumped into him. Mom! His voice cracked on the word. What are you doing here? I stood smoothing my suit. Hello, Samuel. Vanessa. Please sit down. I don't understand, Vanessa said, looking between me and Helen. We're supposed to meet with the building owner. You are, Helen said calmly. May I introduce Margaret Walters, owner of this property and 5 others in the city. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the ventilation system humming. Samuel's face went through a series of transformations: confusion, disbelief, shock, then something that looked almost like betrayal. "That's not funny, Mom." "It's not a joke," I said quietly. "Please sit." They sat, moving like people underwater, slow and uncertain. Vanessa found her voice first. "You own this building?" "Yes." "Our building? Where we live?" "Yes." "How long?" Samuel's hands were flat on the table, knuckles white. "How long have you owned it?" 12 years. Your father bought it at auction 2 years before he died. It was one of 6 properties he left me." 6? Vanessa's voice rose sharply. "You own 6 buildings? 3 apartment buildings, 2 commercial properties, and 1 residential penthouse." I kept my tone even, factual. "Your father was an investor. A very successful one. He preferred to keep it quiet." Samuel was shaking his head, slowly, like he could physically reject the information. No, Dad was a contractor. He worked construction. We lived in a normal house, we had a normal life. Your father was a contractor who bought undervalued properties, renovated them himself, and rented them at market rate," I corrected. "He did that for 25 years. And yes, we lived in a normal house because that's what we wanted. What we chose. You've been lying to us." Vanessa's voice had gone cold. "This whole time, letting us think you were some struggling widow." "I never said I was struggling. You assumed. You let us believe it." "I let you believe what you wanted to believe," I said. "I never asked you for money. I never claimed poverty. I simply didn't announce my financial situation, which is my right." Samuel was staring at me like I was a stranger. "We've been paying you rent. For 8 months we've been paying you rent. You've been paying market rate for your apartment, yes. The same rate as every other tenant." "Jesus Christ, Mom." He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "Do you understand how humiliating this is? We've been killing ourselves trying to save money, asking you for help, and you've been our landlord this whole time. You asked me to sell my home and give you $300,000, I said, my voice sharper now. You created spreadsheets detailing how I should spend my money. You called me selfish for refusing. So yes, Samuel, I do understand humiliation." Vanessa's eyes were bright with anger, or tears, I couldn't tell. "We were trying to help you. We thought you needed help." "Did you ask if I needed help? Or did you simply decide I did? You're living in that old house, driving that shitty car, wearing clothes from Target. What were we supposed to think? You were supposed to think that maybe, just maybe, I'm content with my choices. That maybe I don't measure my worth by the price of my handbag." The comment landed exactly as I'd intended. Vanessa's face flushed. Helen cleared her throat. "Mrs. Walters asked for this meeting because you submitted a formal complaint about your living conditions and requested a rent reduction. Should we discuss that? Or would you prefer to reschedule?" "There's no noise problem," Samuel said dully, still staring out the window. "We made it up. We thought if we complained enough, we could leverage a reduction or break the lease." "I see," I said. "So you were planning to defraud your landlord." "Don't." He spun around, his face anguished. "Don't do that. Don't make this about us when you're the one who's been lying." "I haven't lied once. But let's talk about truth, shall we?" I pulled out a folder. I'd prepared this with Helen, knowing it might be necessary. "You told me you were struggling financially. That rent was killing you. But according to your social media, which is public by the way, in the last 6 months you've taken 3 vacations. Mexico, Colorado, and wine country. You've posted photos from at least a dozen expensive restaurants. Vanessa's wearing a different designer outfit in every photo." Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed. "You're not struggling," I continued. "You're living beyond your means and expecting other people to subsidize the difference. You wanted my house not because you needed it, but because you wanted what you wanted now rather than waiting and earning it yourselves." "That's not fair," Samuel said, but his voice had no force behind it. "What's not fair," I said, standing now, "is looking at your mother and seeing only what she could give you. What's not fair is deciding that at 67, I've had my time and should step aside for your convenience." The words hung in the air between us. "I didn't mean," Samuel started. You did. You meant exactly that. And Vanessa agreed with you. I looked at my daughter-in-law, who had gone very pale. You looked at me and saw someone small. Someone manageable. Someone whose life mattered less than your plans. Margaret, Vanessa tried. Mrs. Walters, I corrected. In this room in this building, I'm Mrs. Walters. Your landlord. And your landlord is not going to reduce your rent, break your lease early, or return your deposit outside the standard terms. Your landlord expects you to honor your contract exactly as written. Helen slid 2 documents across the table. Your lease runs for another 4 months. At that point, you may choose to renew at the adjusted market rate, which will be approximately 15% higher, or you may vacate. Those are your options. Samuel looked at the papers like they might bite him. You're raising our rent? I'm adjusting all units to current market rate, I said. Yours included. Though if you find that unacceptable, I'm sure you could ask your mother for help. Oh wait. It was cruel. I knew it was cruel even as I said it. But something in me needed them to feel a fraction of what I'd felt, sitting at their dining table while they parceled out my future like I was already gone. Vanessa gathered her laptop with shaking hands. I think we should go. Yes, I agreed. I think you should. They stood, moving toward the door in a daze. Samuel paused at the threshold, looking back at me. Who are you? He asked, and his voice broke on the question. I don't even know who you are. I'm exactly who I've always been, I said. I'm just not who you decided I was. They left. The door closed with a soft click. Helen let out a long breath. Well, that was necessary, I finished. I was going to say devastating, but sure, let's go with necessary. I sat back down, suddenly exhausted. My hands were trembling, adrenaline and grief mixing in my bloodstream. Did I just destroy my relationship with my son? I don't know, Helen said honestly. But you did something arguably more important. You showed him the truth. I drove home in my old Honda, the one they thought was a safety hazard, and I sat in my driveway for a long time before going inside. The house looked exactly as it always had. Modest, quiet mine. Inside, I made tea and sat at the kitchen table where Samuel had told me I'd had my time, where everything had started to break. My phone was silent. No calls. No texts. I thought about Thomas, about the empire he'd built in secret, about the penthouse where I'd never lived, the properties I managed quietly, the life I'd created that no one bothered to ask about. Money didn't change me. Silence revealed them. And now the question was, what came next? When my son married, I never told them I owned a penthouse. Thank God I didn't. The first week after the meeting, I heard nothing. No calls. No texts. No apologetic emails or angry voicemails. Just silence, the kind that feels deliberate, weaponized. The kind designed to punish. I went about my life. I had my properties to manage, my routines to maintain. I met with David to review maintenance requests. I had lunch with Mrs. Chun from book club, who asked carefully if everything was all right with Samuel. He seemed upset at the grocery store, she said. He didn't want to talk. We had a disagreement, I told her. We'll work through it. But I wasn't sure we would. At night, alone in the house, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. I'd burned something down in that conference room, something that might have been dysfunctional and built on false assumptions, but that had still been a relationship with my son. And now I didn't know what remained in the ashes. I thought about calling him, reaching out first the way mothers do. But something stopped me each time I picked up the phone. He needed to sit with this. With what he'd done, what he'd said, who he'd revealed himself to be. And I needed to know if he was capable of understanding why. On day 9, Vanessa called. Not Samuel. Vanessa. Margaret, she said when I answered, her voice carefully controlled. We need to talk. I'm listening. Not on the phone. Can we meet? Just the two of us. I almost said no, but curiosity won out. Where? That cafe where we met before. Tomorrow at 10. The cafe where she'd asked me to sell my house and fund their down payment. The symmetry was almost poetic. I'll be there, I said. She was already seated when I arrived, No matcha drink this time. Just black coffee and hands wrapped around the cup like she needed the warmth. She looked tired, genuinely tired, not the fashionable exhaustion young people sometimes perform. I ordered my coffee and sat down across from her. "Thank you for coming," she said. I waited. I'd learned the power of silence. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Vanessa continued, not meeting my eyes. "About what happened. About everything that led up to it." She paused, took a breath. "I owe you an apology." "Do you?" "Yes." She finally looked at me. "We treated you terribly. I treated you terribly. And the worst part is, I didn't even realize I was doing it." "Tell me what you think you did," I said. "Specifically." She flinched slightly but continued. "We made assumptions about you. About your life, your capabilities, your finances. We decided you needed help without asking if you wanted it. We pressured you to make decisions that benefited us and called it concern." Her voice wavered. "And I said things about your clothes, your car, your age, that were condescending and cruel. I justified it by telling myself I was trying to help, but really, I think I just needed to feel superior. It was more self-awareness than I'd expected." "Why? Why what? Why did you need to feel superior to me?" Vanessa looked down at her coffee. "Because I've been terrified. Samuel and I make good money, but San Francisco is expensive and we're trying to do everything right. Save for a house, plan for kids, build the perfect life, and it feels impossible. Everyone around us seems to have help. Parents paying down payments, trust funds, inheritances. And we thought we were alone in this, struggling, while everyone else had a safety net. So you decided I should be your safety net." "Yes," she admitted. "And when you said no, it felt like rejection. Like you didn't love Samuel enough to help him." "But I never said no to helping Samuel," I pointed out. "I said no to selling my house and giving you $300,000. Those are different things." "I understand that now." She rubbed her face tiredly. "Look, I know this doesn't fix anything. I know I'm sorry isn't enough after everything we said and did. But I wanted you to know that I see it. I see what we did wrong." "And Samuel?" I asked. "Does he see it?" Vanessa's expression tightened. "Samuel is processing. He's angry. At you, at himself, at the situation. He feels betrayed that you didn't tell him about the money." "I didn't betray him. I simply maintained my privacy." "I know. I've told him that. But he's having trouble separating what you did, which was nothing wrong, from how it makes him feel, which is embarrassed and foolish." She leaned forward slightly. "Margaret, he loves you. He's just hurt and confused and doesn't know how to come back from what he said to you. He told me I'd had my time." "I know. And he regrets it. He's just too proud to admit it yet." Pride. Thomas used to say pride was the most expensive luxury a person could afford. "What do you want from me, Vanessa?" I asked. "Why are we here? I want to know if there's a path forward. If we can fix this. Because I love your son. And I don't want his relationship with his mother to be destroyed because of my greed and stupidity." It was the first fully honest thing she'd said to me since I'd met her. No performance, no calculation. Just raw truth. "I don't know," I said finally. "I genuinely don't know if this can be fixed." She nodded, blinking back tears. "That's fair. That's more than fair." She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you. Don't open it now. Just when you're ready." She left cash on the table for both our coffees and walked out. I sat there for a long time before opening the envelope. Inside was a check, for the last 4 months of rent, paid in full through the end of their lease, and a handwritten note. "We'll be moving out at the end of the lease term. We found a smaller place we can actually afford. You were right about everything. I hope someday you can forgive us. 2 weeks later, Samuel finally called. "Mom." His voice was rough, uncertain. "Can I come over?" "Yes." He arrived an hour later, looking like he hadn't been sleeping well. I made coffee, his old way with cream and sugar, and we sat at the kitchen table where we'd had 1,000 conversations before everything broke. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "For all of it. For what I said, how I treated you, what I assumed. I'm so sorry, Mom." "Tell me what you're sorry for," I said. echoing what I'd asked Vanessa. Specifically, he took a shaky breath. I'm sorry for treating you like you were incompetent, for making decisions about your life without including you, for caring more about what you could give me than who you actually are. His voice cracked. And I'm sorry for telling you that you'd had your time. That was, God, Mom, that was unforgivable. It hurt, I said simply. More than anything else, that hurt. I know. I knew at the moment I said it, but I was so caught up in feeling entitled to your help that I couldn't stop myself. He wiped his eyes roughly. I don't have an excuse. I was selfish and cruel, and I treated you the way I'd never want someone to treat me. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I asked the question I needed answered. Do you understand why I stayed quiet? Why I didn't tell you about the properties? I think so. You wanted to know who we really were. What we really thought of you without money complicating it. Partly, I agreed. But also, Samuel, I stayed quiet because it's my life. My money. My choice. I don't owe anyone an explanation of my financial situation just because they're related to me. Even your son? Even my son, I said firmly. You're an adult. You have your own life, your own career, your own marriage. And I have mine. My choices, how I live, what I own, what I do with my resources, those are mine to make. He absorbed that, nodding slowly. Dad taught you that. Your father taught me a lot of things. He taught me that wealth doesn't require announcement. That security comes from careful planning, not showing off. That the best legacy isn't money. It's teaching people to build their own life with integrity. Did I fail that lesson? Samuel asked quietly. Is that what this was about? I reached across the table and took his hand, the first time I touched him in almost a month. You didn't fail. You stumbled. There's a difference. What do I do now? You learn from it. You grow. You build the life you want without expecting other people to fund it or shrink themselves to accommodate it. I squeezed his hand. And you remember that your mother loves you. But that love doesn't mean sacrificing my own well-being for your convenience. He feels betrayed that you didn't tell him about the money. I didn't betray him. I simply maintained my privacy. I know. I've told him that. But he's having trouble separating what you did, which was nothing wrong, from how it makes him feel, which is embarrassed and foolish. She leaned forward slightly. Margaret, he loves you. He's just hurt and confused and doesn't know how to come back from what he said to you. He told me I'd had my time. I know. And he regrets it. He's just too proud to admit it yet. Pride. Thomas used to say pride was the most expensive luxury a person could afford. What do you want from me, Vanessa? I asked. Why are we here? I want to know if there's a path forward. If we can fix this. Because I love your son. And I don't want his relationship with his mother to be destroyed because of my greed and stupidity. It was the first fully honest thing she'd said to me since I'd met her. No performance, no calculation. Just raw truth. I don't know, I said finally. I genuinely don't know if this can be fixed. She nodded, blinking back tears. That's fair. That's more than fair. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. This is for you. Don't open it now. Just when you're ready. She left cash on the table for both our coffees and walked out. I sat there for a long time before opening the envelope. Inside was a check, for the last 4 months of rent, paid in full through the end of their lease, and a handwritten note. We'll be moving out at the end of the lease term. We found a smaller place we can actually afford. You were right about everything. I hope someday you can forgive us. 2 weeks later, Samuel finally called. Mom. His voice was rough, uncertain. Can I come over? Yes. He arrived an hour later, looking like he hadn't been sleeping well. I made coffee, his old way with cream and sugar, and we sat at the kitchen table where we'd had 1,000 conversations before everything broke. I'm sorry, he said immediately. For all of it. For what I said, how I treated you, what I assumed. I'm so sorry, Mom. Tell me what you're sorry for, I said, echoing what I'd asked Vanessa. Specifically. He took a shaky breath. I'm sorry for treating you like you were incompetent. For making decisions about your life without including you. for caring more about what you could give me than who you actually are. His voice cracked. And I'm sorry for telling you that you'd had your time. God, Mom, that was unforgivable. It hurt, I said simply. More than anything else, that hurt. I know. I knew at the moment I said it, but I was so caught up in feeling entitled to your help that I couldn't stop myself. He wiped his eyes roughly. I don't have an excuse. I was selfish and cruel, and I treated you the way I'd never want someone to treat me. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I asked the question I needed answered. Do you understand why I stayed quiet? Why I didn't tell you about the properties? I think so. You wanted to know who we really were. What we really thought of you, without money complicating it. Partly, I agreed. But also, Samuel, I stayed quiet because it's my life. My money. My choice. I don't owe anyone an explanation of my financial situation, just because they're related to me. Even your son? Even my son, I said firmly. You're an adult. You have your own life, your own career, your own marriage. And I have mine. My choices, how I live, what I own, what I do with my resources, those are mine to make. He absorbed that, nodding slowly. Dad taught you that. Your father taught me a lot of things. He taught me that wealth doesn't require announcement. That security comes from careful planning, not showing off. That the best legacy isn't money. It's teaching people to build their own life with integrity. Did I fail that lesson? Samuel asked quietly. Is that what this was about? I reached across the table and took his hand, the first time I'd touched him in almost a month. You didn't fail. You stumbled. There's a difference. What do I do now? You learn from it. You grow. You build the life you want without expecting other people to fund it or shrink themselves to accommodate it. I squeezed his hand. And you remember that your mother loves you. But that love doesn't mean sacrificing my own well-being for your convenience. He nodded, tears streaming down his face now. Can I ask you something? Always. Why did you raise our rent? That felt vindictive. It wasn't vindictive. It was business, I said. Every unit in that building is going up to market rate. Yours isn't special. But Samuel, if you'd asked me for help as my son, genuinely asked with humility and respect, acknowledging that it would be a gift and not an entitlement, I would have considered it. But you didn't ask. You demanded. And then you tried to defraud me. He had the grace to look ashamed. We're moving out. Vanessa told you. She did. We found a place in Oakland. Smaller, cheaper. We're going to actually live within our means for once. He laughed bitterly. Turns out we've been living like rich people while asking you to subsidize it. The irony isn't lost on me. Good, I said. That's growth. Over the next 6 months, things slowly mended. Not back to what they were, that relationship was gone, built as it was on false assumptions and unexamined dynamics. But something new emerged, something more honest. Samuel and Vanessa moved to their smaller apartment. They downsized their lifestyle. Vanessa started a blog about real budgeting and living within means. Apparently her journey resonated with other millennials who'd been performing wealth they didn't have. It became moderately successful. They visited me once a month for dinner. Real visits, not inspections. They asked me about my life, my properties, my plans. They listened to stories about Thomas and the business he'd built. Vanessa asked me to teach her about real estate investing. Not so you'll give me money, she clarified quickly. So I can learn to build something myself. I taught her. We met weekly, going over property analysis, market trends, tenant management. She was a quick study, and I found I enjoyed mentoring her. Samuel started therapy. He called one day to tell me his therapist said he'd been carrying guilt about his father's death. Guilt that he hadn't been more successful, hadn't made Thomas proud, hadn't lived up to some imagined standard. I think I needed you to need me, he said, so I could feel like I was finally doing enough. Oh, sweetheart, I said. Your father was so proud of you. And you don't need to prove anything to anyone, least of all to me. The healing wasn't linear. There were setbacks, arguments, moments of tension. But there was also honesty now. Real conversation. Respect. 1 year after the conference room meeting, I did something I'd been considering for months. I invited Samuel and Vanessa to meet me at an address downtown. I didn't tell them where or why, just asked them to trust me. When they arrived at the glass tower, confusion crossed their faces. "Isn't this your building?" Samuel asked. "Where we used to live." One of them, "Yes. Come with me." I led them to the elevator, pressed the button for the 42nd floor. Their confusion deepened. The penthouse door opened to reveal the space Thomas had built. The exposed brick, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the river view, the bookshelves in every room. The home he'd meant to surprise me with. "Oh my God," Vanessa whispered. "This is mine," I finished. "This is where your father wanted us to retire, Samuel. He renovated it himself over 5 years. I've never lived here. I couldn't. It felt like letting go of our real home. The place where we actually built our life together." Samuel walked slowly through the space, touching the bookshelves, looking out at the view. "This is incredible, Mom. Why are you showing us now?" "Because I've made a decision." I pulled out an envelope, a mirror of what Vanessa had done a year before. "I'm selling the house. The one you wanted me to sell." They both froze. "I'm selling it," I continued, "because you were right about one thing. It's too big for me now, and I'm tired of maintaining it alone. But I'm not selling it to give you money. I'm selling it because I'm finally ready to move here, to the home Thomas built for us. I'm ready for that next chapter." "Mom, that's great," Samuel said carefully. "Really? But why are we here?" I handed him the envelope. "Because I wanted you to know. And because I wanted to give you this." He opened it. Inside was a check for $50,000. "What?" "Consider it a very early inheritance," I said. "Use it for a down payment on your Oakland place if you want to buy instead of rent. Or invest it. Or save it. It's yours, freely given, because I love you and I want to support you. But on my terms, in my time, as a gift rather than an extraction." Vanessa was crying. Samuel was staring at the check like he couldn't believe it was real. "There are conditions," I added. "You match it with your own savings. I know you've been building them. You make all property decisions together with a financial advisor. And you never, ever tell me I've had my time again." Samuel crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled me into a fierce hug. "Never. I will never say that again. Thank you. Thank you, Mom." "You're welcome," I said, holding him tight. "Now, who wants to help me pack up 30 years of memories?" Moving into the penthouse was both an ending and a beginning. I brought what mattered from the old house: Thomas's clock, our wedding photos, the kitchen table where we'd had 1,000 conversations, and left the rest for estate sale. Samuel and Vanessa bought their Oakland house. They invited me to the closing, and I watched them sign papers with hands that trembled with excitement rather than entitlement. I started hosting monthly dinners in the penthouse. Sometimes just Samuel and Vanessa. Sometimes Mrs. Chun and the book club. Sometimes David, my property manager, and Helen, my lawyer. The people who'd helped me navigate this strange second act of life. On my 68th birthday, Samuel gave me a gift. A photo album he'd made. It started with pictures of him as a child. Me and Thomas, our old house, the normal life we'd chosen. Then pictures from the wedding, the awkward early months with Vanessa. And then, surprisingly, screenshots of our texts, photos of the confrontation building, even the rent check Vanessa had written. "Why would you include those?" I asked. "Because it's the truth," he said. "The whole truth. The parts where I was wonderful and the parts where I was terrible. The parts where I grew up." He pointed to the last pages, still empty. "These are for what comes next. Whatever that is." What came next was better than I could have planned. Vanessa's blog led to a book deal about financial honesty and generational wealth. Samuel got promoted at work. They had a baby, my granddaughter Clara, and asked me to be in the delivery room. I held that tiny person and thought about Thomas, about the empire he'd built in silence, about the gift of security he'd given me that let me hold boundaries when I needed them most. "Thank you," I whispered to him wherever he was. "Thank you for teaching me that love doesn't require diminishing yourself." People sometimes ask me if I regret staying quiet for so long. If I wish I'd told Samuel about the properties from the beginning, avoided all the pain and conflict. I tell them the truth. I don't regret it for a second. Because silence revealed something I needed to see. It showed me who my son was becoming when he thought I had nothing to offer but obligation. And it showed him who he needed to become to deserve the life he wanted. Money didn't change me. Never could have. But silence changed them. And in changing them, it saved us all. The penthouse sits 42 floors above the city Thomas loved. Sometimes I stand at those windows and watch the lights below. All those lives intersecting. All those stories unfolding. All those people learning the same hard lessons about love and boundaries and the space between who we are and who we choose to be. My son lives in Oakland now with his wife and daughter. They visit every Sunday. We cook together in Thomas's kitchen. We laugh. We remember. We build something new on the foundation of hard truths spoken aloud. And when Clara is old enough, I'll tell her about her grandfather, the man who built an empire in silence and left his widow the greatest gift of all. The freedom to be exactly who she was, without apology, without explanation, without diminishing herself for anyone's comfort. Sometimes love requires boundaries. Sometimes you teach people how to treat you by showing them what you won't accept. And sometimes the greatest freedom comes the moment you stop shrinking yourself to fit other people's expectations. I'm 68 years old. I live in a penthouse I finally feel worthy of. I have a son who learned humility the hard way. I have a daughter-in-law who became an unexpected friend. I have a granddaughter who will grow up knowing that women don't have to diminish themselves to be loved. The life I thought I had was built on assumptions and unspoken expectations. It shattered completely. But what we built in its place, through pain and honesty and the hard work of real respect, is smaller, quieter, imperfect. But it's real. It's honest. And for the first time in 12 years, that feels like enough. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm so glad you made it this far. Tomorrow I have another unhinged story that will definitely touch you. Subscribe to this channel so you can be notified when the video drops. See you in the next one.